A different voice, female, great. Just to liven things up a bit. How to start? Okay, just as a framework for what I'm going to say, echoing everything that's been said so far. I'll try not to wave my arms around too much. Terrorism, violent extremism is a global phenomenon. I don't think there's a single country it doesn't affect, even Bali. The other thing is that terrorism exists because governments want it to exist, echoing again some of the things that have been said. So various governments benefit in various ways. They are literally proxy armies for governments. And the other thing is that I very firmly believe that terrorism and violent extremism have nothing to do with religion or other beliefs. It is a political act. It's about politics. If you want to wage a real jihad, you will go to your imam and he will tell you, don't do it. It is a political act, no matter how it's dressed up. Okay, so I better kind of introduce myself. I'm going to talk about radicalization. We've talked, people have explained about terrorist groups, how it's funded, where it comes from, and such like. I'm going to take you inside the mindset of the terrorist. What is radicalization? What does it actually mean? We haven't actually talked about the people involved. So I'm going to do that really controversial thing and talk about the victims of terrorism, and I don't mean the people who have been hurt by terrorism. Let me just explain. I talk in the UK about preventing terrorism, so we go into schools and various organisations and explain how people are radicalised and how we can prevent them. One thing we know is that we can't spot them. How do you actually go into the street and say, okay, who is a terrorist? Which of these children would you have looked at in a classroom and said, okay, they're going to grow up and be a terrorist? It's not a career choice, okay? So these people grew up to be, you might not know them because some of them, Jihadi John, we know, Mohammed Emwazi, Nicky Riley was a young British man who tried to blow up a restaurant and blew up himself in the toilet. He survived, went to prison. Aqsa Mahmood, she is still a prolific recruiter. She was privately educated in Scotland and went to Syria. She's still recruiting. And of course, the notorious Anders Breivik from Norway. And then there's another one there. Let's see. Okay, that's me. Doesn't look like me, that's 10 years ago. That's very young. The age of 19, I had an Iranian boyfriend. That was in 1978, so yes, I'm 59 years old. Quite. And of course, there was a revolution in Iran. And my boyfriend was recruited into the Mujahideen Khalq, and I followed him in. So I was involved with the Mujahideen Khalq for 20 years. A white British middle class educated person. I see looks of wow, shock, yeah. Now you see why I didn't want to spoil the big surprise from the beginning. Okay, so this is me in 1991. What happened in 1991? There was a war, wasn't there, over there? Yeah, First Gulf War. So that's me, second from the left. There's Lisette next to me, and Eva from, Lisette is from Holland, one of them is from Italy. So we were women from Europe involved in a foreign terrorist organisation. And in case you thought that this was some kind of fake, you know, namby-pamby terrorist group, which I'm sure you don't, people who know them know they're not, that's their statistics. They're pretty bad people. Now, I got out, fortunately, married my husband. My husband just to put it out there, was the bodyguard for the leader for 6 years, head of security, intelligence for the Mujahideen. So kind of knew pretty much the top of the organisation. I was a foot soldier, quite literally. I knew, you know, I didn't know anything. I thought I was taking part in some sort of heroic battle against religious dictatorship and fighting for human rights in Iran. All sorts of crazy things. You can ask me later how crazy I was. But I got out and realised that they were a very bad group of people, and they were not at all what they said they were. They had deceived me very badly. They deceived all the members very badly. In fact, I was in what they call the public relations office, doing public relations, doing the liaison with media, politicians and such like. And one of our jobs was to talk about human rights. And of course, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration, there are 16 articles in it. When I came out of the organisation and I read through them, I realised that not one single article had applied to me as a member of this organisation. In other words, I'd given up all my human rights. I had no country. I'd given them my passport. I had no money. They didn't pay me. The organisation banned marriage, so you couldn't get married. Just if you look at the articles, you say, well, who are these people? I'll tell you who we were. We were slaves in that organisation, slaves and gladiators. So what did I do? I thought, well, I can't let this lie. Of course, I'd gone into the organisation being a bit of a kind of, I'll put the world to rights, and I was very keen to make change and do things. So, of course, when I came out, I was still the same person, and I thought, let's go and do something. Now, in 2003 in Iraq, of course, the Mujahideen were based in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. In 2003, when that regime was overthrown, deposed, what happened was that the families of the Mek, I'll just call them the Mek, went to Iraq, even though there was a war on. And you saw what the conditions were. There were bombs everywhere. But these families had not had contact with their loved ones for 20 years, some of them. And the first thing they did, they went to the gate of the camp and they tried to make contact. And they couldn't, because the Mujahideen is a closed, insular group. They don't allow contact with families. So my husband and I started working with families, and we created a foundation, and we basically became their advocates in the West and such like. I visited Iraq myself again, and was invited by somebody from the al-Maliki family, basically just trying to publicise this issue. Anyway, back in the UK, I became involved in speaking about my experiences and trying to warn people. And I made the link, and I won't talk much more about this, we made the link with cult recruitment and cult activity. So I don't know if you understand the word sect better, Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Jim Jones massacre, the kind of methodology which these groups use was exactly the same as the radicalisation process which I'd come across. So here I am, 3 weeks ago. The Mujahideen have now relocated to Albania. So, you know, what's the problem? Well, I can tell you it is a problem. These people are radicalised, and although I think it was $20 million paid to the Albanian government by America to take the group and de-radicalise them, instead of being de-radicalised, they are now regrouped, isolating themselves, putting themselves behind closed doors, and continuing and increasing their activities. So what I will go on to talk about next is the radicalization process. Why? Because unless you understand how people are radicalized, it's very difficult to understand how to de-radicalize them. So you can say, okay, well, put everybody in Albania, they'll be fine, they can't do anything there, they can't, you know, be involved in terrorism. Unfortunately, you have to de-radicalize people because of the process. Okay, so questions at the end, please. I'm such a pussycat, I will answer all your questions. I'll ask a question for you, okay? So what do they do all day? What do terrorists do all day? Goodness me. Play backgammon. So what we see in the public arena is the result of terrorism, isn't it? We see things blown up, we see people killed, we see all the horrific activities that terrorist groups do. But that is the tip of the iceberg, because underneath that group, underneath all that activity, there's a whole load of stuff going on. The main activity of any of these groups is recruitment and fundraising. And although, yes, groups will be paid by, I know the Mujahideen have been paid by Saudi Arabia, they've been paid by various elements in America, in Israel and such like. But they also do fundraising. They go and they run businesses, they go and ask people for money. They do what you might call money laundering, because fundraising is a very complex thing, but you need money. Recruitment. Why do you recruit? Because, hey, you know, the more the merrier. So the main activity, believe it or not, of terrorist groups is not blowing people up, and although they do that, recruitment. So what's the danger? When you send a terrorist group to a country, what do they start doing? They start recruiting. They don't have to recruit Iranian people, because I wasn't Iranian, I was English. They recruited me. I worked for them for 20 years. Okay? Let's start with this thought. The number of reasons why people get involved in violent extremism and terrorism is exactly equal to the number of people involved. There isn't a formula. There isn't, as our first speaker, Omar, was saying, that people get involved for various reasons. They're criminals, for adventure, because they believe in it. It attracts a wide range of people. What is common to all these groups is that people don't necessarily join, they're recruited. As I said, being a terrorist is not a career choice. It's not something you leave school and think, gosh, shall I be a hairdresser or a terrorist? Let's see. You are recruited into it. Somebody appreciates my humour. How that deceptive recruitment takes place is again what I want to go on and talk about. This has got to be the most off-the-wall presentation you've heard yet. The outcome of this recruitment isn't revealed at the beginning. It's not as if somebody comes up to you and says, look, you know, would you actually like to strap some bombs to yourself and kill yourself? That's not how they work. They go there and they say, there's this noble cause, there's this terrible problem, the Middle East is in crisis, Islam is in crisis, I don't know, we've got an immigration problem in Britain, come and join us, let's do something. They hook you in on a message, and I'm sort of jumping about a bit. I wasn't sure how to kind of get this message across, but the families of people who have been involved in terrorism, especially, you know, the ones who are foreign fighters, they don't have a stake in that. I mean, if you're Syrian, you might have a reason to go and fight there, or if you're Iraqi, you'll have a reason to go and fight there. You may be one of Saddam Hussein's ex-soldiers, and you have nothing else to do, and there's a mercenary, you'll say, well, if you pay me, I'll fight for you. That's a legitimate reason, maybe. But lots and lots and lots of people go and fight in these groups. and their families are absolutely shocked and horrified. How, you know, because this is my son, my daughter, I brought them up nicely, they were very polite, they were good people. I didn't bring them up to kill people or be killed. So I think families have, well, the public has a problem understanding what's the mindset, what goes on in their head. How do you get from being a school kid to being a terrorist? Okay, so there is a process. This is what the British government has defined it. Radicalisation is a process. It's not a one-off event. It doesn't just happen. And it takes place in a relationship. And that's a very important thing, because there's a lot of talk about people being radicalised by the internet. How can the internet radicalise you? They are radicalised over the internet. There's a very big difference. The internet doesn't radicalise people. People radicalise people. I have, I guess, reduced it, if you like, to a formula. This process, and the process is sophisticated. Although I've put 5 words there, but it's a very, very time-consuming and a sophisticated process. It doesn't happen easily. And the reason that groups recruit widely is because for every person they approach, there may be 100 people who they approach, but only they'll recruit 1. So let's say the first step is to attract people to your group. How do you attract them? You attract them by creating an ideology, okay? So we call it ideology, or the people who talk about terrorism and such like, they talk about ideology. Is it jihadi? Is it this? It's Salafi? Whatever. It is actually a recruiting script, and that's exactly what it is. It's a script that you read out. You know, join me because I'm fighting for human rights. Join me because I'm fighting for the caliphate. Join me because I'm trying to get rid of black people in Britain and send them all back home. Now, there are very important elements to this recruiting script. One is that it's believable, because if you talk about Martians or, you know, some weird thing, people will say it's just talking nonsense. But if you look at a real problem in the world, it doesn't matter what that problem is, as long as it's got some basis in genuine problems that people think, oh, that's a problem, let's go and do something about it. The ideology, let's call it, is also exclusive. They say only we have the answers. Only we, no one else. We're the only people who actually get this problem, and we have the answers. The government doesn't know, you know, your auntie or uncle, they're talking nonsense. We have the answers. But their answers, it's always a black and white system. It's always kind of like, it's us or them. We're the goodies, they're the baddies. And it sounds ludicrous, but that is the essence of this ideological message. But what's more important than anything else is that it's entirely fictitious. They've completely made it up, okay? And yes, they can base it on the Bible, on the Quran, they can base it on Marx, or, you know, they will come up with a sort of a few facts, a few what they call sacred texts. But it's all made up. Somebody sat there and said, let's just cobble this all together, present it, and it's usually a charismatic leader. There'll be some, like Osama bin Laden, you know, somebody that people will follow because he's either a religious leader or he's got some kind of character. And this is kind of across the board, different groups. But when you're talking about radicalisation, the actual ideology or the belief system of the group sanctions violence. It more or less says that we have the answer to this problem, but it's actually violence. It actually says we will have to fight, because we've tried everything else. We've tried peaceful solutions. None of it worked. We can't establish the caliphate, for example, without a fight. I'm sorry, I keep harping on about the caliphate, but it's a kind of it's given far too much emphasis. There are many, many groups who are just as dangerous, however, PKK and such like. So, okay, how do you attract? You attract using what you call sincere believers. These are people who actually really believe in this message. They think it's a great idea, but they're not necessarily going to go on and do things for you. And they will want to convince others, because everybody wants to say, I'm right. Everybody wants to say, my religion is right, my belief is right, I've got some genuine points here. So their role in this big picture of recruitment is to go fishing for recruits. Now, where do they go? Again, they don't go to the obvious places. They won't go to, say, a mosque. They will go to a boxing club, where young men go and they want to have, camaraderie, they want brotheriness, they want to be mentored, and they will talk to them, take them aside, invite them for further meetings, and they will just try their best to choose young people who will become engaged with this message. That's the important thing, that the young person says, that's interesting, hadn't thought of that, let's go and find out more. And that's why we call it seeker mode. They're seeking. And the people who get recruited are generally those people who are interested in different ideas, or changing the world, or putting the world to rights, as I said I was like. And so once you engage with the ideas, then they can pull you forward. Now, I can sort of, well, let me show you what I think is a kind of a way of explaining the process. Okay, so you start with the attraction, and this is across all groups. It's not specific to any group. I have chosen animal rights because in Britain we love animals so much. We eat lots of them. So animal experiments, there's a big kind of, well, not a big, there's a kind of protest movement, let's call it, in Britain, which say you shouldn't do animal experiments either for things like cosmetics, makeup, or for medical reasons. They want to protect animals from all harm. And so there are many, many people who think that that's a genuine problem, and university students will go on demonstrations, and they will go and sort of protest. Then, okay, so here's a radical idea. We all have radical ideas. We all think differently. We all have something in our minds that other people go, what? What, you're crazy? You think that, really? You think Donald Trump's great? So one of the radical ideas you could have is you use human beings instead of animals to do the experiments. And the picture's a bit of a joke, it's not real, but it's a radical idea. But then that radical idea could turn into a radical belief. And that radical belief is a very different thing, because it's an emotional response. It's not just a kind of crazy idea that you have, it's a response. And then that will lead you into a more extreme version of your belief, to the point where, as I've put here, you might believe that it's vivisectionists, who are people who experiment on animals, deserve to die. And once you start believing those things, then it could become a reality. And a radical act is to plant a bomb under the car of a vivisectionist. The vivisectionist is a person who experiments on animals, a scientist, basically. And so there is a process involved, from radical idea to radical belief to radical act. Now, who's going to take you on this journey? It's an emotional journey. It's not necessarily a thought process, but somebody will take you on that journey. And these are what you call the genuine recruiters. So we had the sincere believers, who are just people like you and I, who, we believe, I'm a Christian, I want everyone to believe in Christianity, so I talk to everyone I know about it. it's at that level. They just try to engage you in their belief system, whatever it is. Or they go down to a bar and talk to people, oh, there's so many immigrants in Britain, what do we do? You know, it's a big problem, they're taking our jobs, blah, blah, blah. And they will engage you in the idea. These people are different. These people are actual recruiters. I mentioned at the beginning Afsa Mahmood. She's a very, very persuasive recruiter. She is the one who's persuading young people to go from Britain. I mean, she's not alone, but she's very successful, to go to the Syrian conflict. And they are what I would call confidence tricksters. You know, they basically know how to manipulate people, and they're very good at it. Is there anybody here who hasn't actually bought something that they didn't really want or need because the salesperson persuaded them to buy it? There's lots of women nodding their heads. Yeah. You know, you can be persuaded to buy something you don't need if the techniques are used. Now, these recruiters, I've used the word intuitive because they intuit, they read you. They'll ask you questions. What are you interested in? What are your hobbies? And they find out what your problems are. Oh, you have a problem with your parents about that. Oh, right. And they'll use these signals that you're giving them to, it's a technique to sort of divert you from what they're really doing. So hard sales techniques, car salesmen famous for it, that they, you know, oh yes, you're the kind of person who would drive this car. And you think, oh, am I really? I didn't realise I was so sporty or rich or whatever. And there is a whole technique for selling stuff. And the difference, of course, is that if you're selling somebody a car, they can just say, well, no, I don't want the car. But if you're selling somebody a belief system, you have no defence because you don't know that you're being mis-sold a belief system because there's nothing there. There's no product. It's a mind game. Okay, so their role, the role of these recruiters who've taken you because you're interested in this subject, they will manipulate your emotional response, and what it may surprise people who, you know, you know terrorism from the angle of the horrific acts which are conducted, but many people who are recruited into terrorism do so because they are altruistic. They want to give up something for their fellow human beings, and that sounds really counterintuitive because, you know, if you are somebody who's going to kill your fellow human beings, how can this be? But as I say, this is a process, and it's a deceptive process. So right at the very beginning, when you're hooked, you probably believe that you're going to do good for people. You probably believe that you're going to go to Syria and be a doctor, or you're going to go there and help cooking or something. Lots and lots of people get involved because they want to give. And there is a kind of feeling of infatuation, which is why it's so difficult to actually persuade somebody not to go and join these groups. You are infatuated, you become in love with them. I'm going to talk a bit later about how that works. So in terms of attraction, the ideology is used as bait, and they'll fish for you, and they will try to attract people. Once you're drawn into the sphere of influence of this group, then they have you. Okay, so what do I mean by the sphere of influence? Okay, onions look different. The red onions, white onions, fat ones, long ones, thin ones, okay? But what I'm trying to show you is that there is a secret organizational structure which allows for control within that onion. So here we are. Every onion looks the same on the inside, does it not? Now this is how terrorism is organized. And I can guarantee you, whether it's Daesh or it's the English Defence League or whether it's Boko Haram or whether it's, I don't know, the Chechen nationalists or something, they will have this kind of structure to organise their activities and their recruits. So you'll have the leader in the middle, you'll have his enforcers close to him, and you'll see as the onion expands, you get more people, okay? So this is why I'm saying that the main activity of the group will be the recruiters, because there are more of them. So it's, the inner core of activists, they're the people who are actually going to be going and fighting, and then around them there are different groups who will be supporting, whether it's money laundering or recruiting and such like. I've put down here at the bottom, cocoon of collusion, a fertile ground. So this onion will only grow in fertile ground. So, okay, when I was a student, the British government was very, very much against the new Iranian government there. And so they did everything they could to encourage people in the media and such like to be anti-Iran. So I had no problem going on demonstrations. As a student, I had posters of martyrs, of suicide bombers. I mean, if you did that nowadays, you'd be in prison. But in those days, it was perfectly acceptable. Who doesn't know Che Guevara? You know, everyone had a poster of Che Guevara on their wall. Here's a revolutionary. This is what we should aspire to. This is. The government is giving you the signal that this is okay. It's great. Let's go for it. So now we have Kurdistan, 2017. Here's a British student, déjà vu. She was a maths student at Liverpool University, and she was recruited by a Kurdish group. I don't know which one it was, doesn't really matter, but the words she uses to describe her recruitment are exactly the same as the words that were used, that I would use. She fell in love with it. She would sacrifice her life for it. Okay? So something's gone on up there. She didn't go to university and study maths and think, change of career, let's go off and be a terrorist. But that's exactly what's happened. She's been recruited. I don't know how much time I have because I've quite a bit of time. 3 minutes. That's optimistic, isn't it? Okay. I think I'm going to have to skip very quickly and just do headlines, okay? Because I have got a lot to explain. So, recruitment, radicalisation. Step 1, attract. Next one, isolate. Remove the person from their family, from the outside world. Make it a case of us and them. We're your new family. You see this a lot. A lot of people in these groups, they treat their comrades as their family rather than their own family. If their own family's in it as well, all the better, because then that consolidates that kind of we're right and they're wrong. They set up an us and them mentality, the black and white version. Questions are not permitted. You can't question and say, but what about this, what about that? You're told if you ask questions, you are sinning against the organisation. But, okay, we have the kind of mental side of things, the ideology, but in the background there is a huge amount of actual coercive manipulation. A lot of techniques which you may find some of them familiar, love bombing, when you love the person, come to our group, everything, all your past sins are forgiven you. Okay, you did drugs when you were young, doesn't matter, we forgive you. You come to our group, we'll forgive you, you just need to participate in our activities. So all these techniques actually create stress. They deliberately bombard you. It's relentless and it is systematic, and it just keeps going, and you say, well, hang on a minute, just let me think about this for a minute. You're not allowed to think at all. They will keep at you, and what you call engulfing you with all this kind of techniques and methodology. So you shut down, almost literally you stop thinking. And I've been there I can tell you it is true, it happens. You just put yourself in their hands and you say, okay, right, whatever, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I can't think. So your what you call it authentic self, which is your happy, as I was, as I am, you suppress it. You're no longer yourself. You take on the persona of the group. You become, the word zombie, it's not correct, because people in these groups, they function quite happily. But if you push them, if you talk to them in depth, they are very restricted in their, reduced in their emotional response, their mental response. One of the things that is an absolute dead giveaway for somebody who's been radicalised is you lose your sense of humour. Why? Because it's so serious. This issue becomes so serious for you that you cannot even take a joke. This is Jihadi John. Long before he actually left Britain and went to, I can't remember where he went, Libya, somewhere, he became radicalised, Egypt, I can't remember. And then he came back, and then he was recruited and went off to Syria. But just after he'd left university, he was already radicalised. How do we know? Because he was zoned out, like a zombie. There was a void behind the eyes. It was awkward. I left pretty quickly. And that was one of his friends who met him in the street and said he was just weird. He'd already been radicalised before he'd gone for his training. Okay, so once the person's shut down, don't think, and they don't let you sleep, they won't feed you properly, they will make sure that you are exhausted and just desperate. Then they can start saying, okay, right, this is what you believe. And the actual ideology, the belief system inside a group is totally different from what we see. When we see any of these terrorist groups, any of them, we see what they want us to see. We don't see what the actual members are being told is their real belief. And that's what you call a hidden knowledge. It's like only we have this hidden knowledge, only we know what's really right. And again, that separates them off from normal society and makes them unreachable. I've put cultic phobias. They put fears into your head to stop you from questioning and leaving. Those fears are things like, if you leave, they will kill you. If you leave, you will become a drug addict for sure. If you leave, your family will hate you. If you leave, and there are so many things that they implant so that you're actually afraid of thinking about anything. So followers are controlled through love. You love the leader, you love the cause, you love your fellow members. But you also fear, because there's always going to be somebody telling on you. He thought that, he did, she did. And there's a kind of policing goes on inside the group, so that if you start to question, start to think about leaving, start to have different ideas, somebody will come and punish you. But also hate. It is us and them. You hate everybody in the outside world. So that's how you are controlled. So once you've actually gone through this process, you are programmed to do what they want you to do, whether it's against your own former beliefs, your family's interests, your own interests, your financial. You will do as you're told. The ends justify the means. And so the outcome of radicalisation is a group member who is controllable, exploitable, deployable, and above all, disposable. You have modern slaves. There's no exit. And I have another 5 minutes. Okay, I said questions at the end. Okay, I am a little pussycat, honestly, I'm so sweet. Separation trauma. What happens when people leave? I'll gallop through this very quickly. Okay, so people leave for various reasons. They're either forced out, or they fell out, or they walked out. Forced out means your group's defeated. Daesh. Tough luck, guys. We won, you lost. or you're rejected by the group because they don't want you. Very often they, at quite early stages in the recruitment, they'll find out that you're not going to be compliant, or you have a mental illness, or you have some problem, and they just say, please leave. You could fall out. A lot of people are separated from their group because they end up in hospital, for example. They have to have an operation, they spend 6 weeks in hospital, or they might be in prison, you know, for the crime they committed, and they're left on their own, and they start thinking, you know, what was I doing? Or you have what we call a light bulb moment, and you wake up in your group and you think, oh, what am I doing here? What are these people? They're just lying to me. There are various ways of leaving, but what happens when anybody leaves such a group? Your mind is mushy. It is like cotton wool. It is like there's nothing in there that works properly at all, because you have been radicalized. And although they do function very in a normal sense on the surface, but if you take them out of context and leave them that person, they cannot think for themselves to begin with. But that's when you need to step in and de-radicalize them, and there is a whole process for doing that. I will just make this see Elsie looking at me. I'll make this the last one I'm going to talk about, but you have a radicalized personality. Okay, so this is why it makes it difficult, and if you understand the radicalization process, then you'll realize that de-radicalizing the person is kind of reversing that. So you're programmed to feel good about yourself. So if somebody says, oh, but you're a member of Daesh and you behead people and you kill, well, how can you possibly do that? You feel good, I'm on the right side. We have to do it because it's our duty. You know, it's jihad or whatever. So you feel good, you don't see what we see. You have a sense of superiority. Of course I'm better than you because I understand more, my knowledge is more, I'm more spiritual and such like. But you're defended. The minute somebody starts to challenge your beliefs, you say, no, I can't, we don't discuss it, you're wrong, I'm right. And a person will become very aggressive even if you challenge them. But also they tell so many lies. But they tell lies because they genuinely believe what they're saying. My husband came out of the Mujahideen and he sincerely believed that the Iranians had used chemical bombs against the Iraqis, when in fact it was exactly the opposite. But he thought that was true. Yes, the Iranians, they used chemical bombs, weapons, sorry. Recovery, yes. This concept that you feel good about yourself. If you're going to go into a de-radicalization process, the first thing you need to do is, I haven't actually put on this slide, is what we do when we, and basically I'm involved in helping MEC members come out and to get back into normal life. You connect them to their family again, because the family are the source of their, what I call authentic self. It's their original person. Only your parents remember that when you were 5 you fell out of the tree and you cried and then she gave you a lollipop, your mum gave you a lollipop, you know. And if you reconnect the person with those memories and those, it sounds a very simple thing, but then the person starts to feel again, starts to think again, and they get back into their genuine personality, and all this kind of radicalized personality will become ridiculous for them. But nobody wants to be told they're wrong, so you can't just go there and say, right, you're wrong, you're a fool, come out of it. Again, this sense of superiority. I've put under here, because what I do in Britain, I kind of teach teachers how to talk to students who are being radicalized. So you have to basically do the same that the group did, the same radicalization process. Do the love bombing, do the kind of attention, treat them differently, connect with them, because you have got to be their alternative family. And they've connected, they've attached to the group emotionally. You need to create an attachment to you emotionally. Defended, again, talk about their behaviour. If you're talking to somebody who's been radicalised, the last thing you should do is talk about the belief system. You need to talk about their behaviour. Why are you so tired all the time? Why are you so worried? What are you frightened of? And kind of connect with their emotional and psychological state rather than their ideas. Again, if you want to get them to think properly again, ask them, tell me something funny. And they'll struggle to do it. But eventually, if you can get them to see the world in a different way, in the way that they can take a joke, then they're halfway to recovery, because that's something, as I say, that will show that they are actually coming out of their zombie state. Again, I think I better move on. So the aim of de-radicalisation is to restore that real person that has been crushed by the group, and so they can start thinking for themselves again, start feeling for themselves again, and your best tools to do that are, again, family. They are the people who know you the best. The people. Mothers will never stop loving their children, ever, and also keep your sense of humour. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Anne. Please stay there. I believe there will be so many questions, but before we start with our questions, I just wanted to give a small intermezzo. Come posso how can I say intermezzo in English? Intermezzo in Italian? A break. We had Anne Khodabandeh here in Tirana like 3 weeks ago. I sent her to Tema and to Ora News and to Vision Plus, etc. Our medias were very suspicious of Anne. Ora News gave a short interview with Anne, like 10 to 15 minutes, if I'm not wrong. 2 days after, the Iranian Mujahideen, they went to boss of Ora News, told them, please delete the interview with Anne because she's an Iranian agent. So now you can see what kind of agent she is. She's very good on de-radicalizing us. So without further ado, I would like you guys to start with your questions. But I had just a question for Anne, because one of the people who is feeling so close with the Mujahideens in Albania is Pandelim Maiko. I mean, he feels so much for them. He even wanted to go and have ice cream with them in Tehran one day. And I was looking at Wikipedia, his profile. I understood that he was even a member of a transnational radical party. So my question is, has he been radicalized or not yet? All right, it was just a joke.
She hasn't got the qualities needed to answer to your question.
I know.
She is not a doctor.
All right, who has a question?
I can say, just my answer to that is, how much?
How much, yeah. Money, sometimes something. Okay, Anissa?
Yes, I would like to know.
Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Anne Khodabandeh. I'm a student in international law, and I would like to ask you a question. How long can it last, the radicalization? And can it be done by the person themselves, or does they need seek help from other persons or institutions?
It can be quite a short process or quite long. As I said, there are various reasons why people or how people leave. The closer you are to the understanding what happened to you, the shorter it takes. There are some people who leave groups and remain radicalized for years. They retain that personality that their group has imposed on them. For that reason, yes, it is very important that help is there, specialist help. On the other hand, if you have left because you had what I call a light bulb moment, it doesn't take too much to actually talk yourself out of it. Once you see that the leader has lied to you, or your fellow members have lied to you, you've been exploited and abused, then you start to understand, you know, what's happened and how to move forward. But help is almost always needed. Yeah.
Further question?
I think maybe the radicalization to the people can be occur only to three aspects: to the youth, to the young people, to the people, unexperienced people, and the third, to the people that have, the young people, to have a conflictual life, and cannot occur to the middle-aged people. Radicalization are very rare people in middle age that are radicalized.
I think, in short, I don't agree. I think anyone can be radicalized at any age, but if you are a group and you are looking for people to perform particular activities, soldiering, fighting, certainly you will look to young people because they're going to be the most advantageous. What groups want are people who are useful. They will not recruit people who are disabled, who have mental illness, who have disabilities, who are otherwise not useful for them. If you are a middle-aged person and you become radicalized, they can certainly use you, but they're not necessarily going after you. They're not necessarily targeting you as a recruit. Young people are, as you say, they're not as experienced in life, and so therefore you can tell them more lies. But I think what must be understood is that this is it's not just about convincing them of an argument. There are techniques of manipulation involved, and they work on anybody at any age. However, yes, there is a point that if you are at a sort of crisis moment in your life, if you are transitioning, you leave home to go to university, or you have a problem with your family, or you get divorced from your husband or wife, you're at a quite susceptible time in your life, and you might be able to be recruited because here's your new family, here's people who care about you, who want to look after you, who want to be your brother and sister. So yes, if you're your life is in order and everything's fine and you're working hard and you've got a good job and you're happy, you're much less likely to be recruited than somebody who is a bit troubled and needs help.
It's really interesting that your surname Khodabandeh, slave of God. And you had fought against the Khuda state. I mean, in Iran, formally they describe themselves as God's justice state.
Iran?
Of course.
Okay.
It is a dilemma. Your husband's surname Khodabandeh. I mean, we can consider that Khodabandeh can fight against African Hulk, but there is a game of destiny.
Well, you don't choose who you fall in love with, so I didn't choose my husband for his name. I think a good name, let's marry him. Yes.
Any other question?
Yes, I'm sure.
I'm just curious. Where do they base that? Do they believe in any religious book, or just revolution?
Okay, so this has been a mystery since the beginning of this group, is what actually is their ideology. They started off, people described them as Islamic Marxists because they started off in a revolutionary sense, fighting against the Shah. They took up armed struggle against the Shah. And then after the revolution, they tried to create a kind of coup d'etat against the newly created Islamic Republic, and that failed, and they were exiled. And at that time, yes, they were an armed, let's say, resistance group. But very, very quickly, Masoud Rajavi took over the leadership, put all the power into his own hands, put his wife as a second command, as a kind of buffer, so that people couldn't challenge him. And therefore, the organisation changed from being a kind of, let's say, ordinary terrorist group into a cult of personality, basically. So that I tried to explain in my presentation that the external belief system of a group, the one that we see, the onion skin, if you like, the different coloured onion skins, that's what we see. So the Mujahideen present as that they're now trying to pretend that there's some kind of democratic, freedom fighting, whatever kind of people, feminists. Internally, your only job is to worship Maryam Rajavi. Now, that's all you need to do. Just don't think, don't feel, don't ask anything, just do as you're told and worship the leader. And that's the internal belief system of that group, as strange as it seems. Does that make sense to you? I don't know if that makes any sense. If you've not been there, it's very difficult to understand.
The last question?
Stunned, you're all
All right. Thank you very much, Anne.